Hi, my name is Glory. I'm a second year student studying at the Bartlett School of Architecture in London, originally from Hong Kong.
And I'm Shan, a second year architecture student, and I'm into musicals, oil painting, movies, and embarrassingly into self-help and Richie biscuits.
You're listening to Designing Thoughts with the Archigals, a podcast where we talk about working and creativity, living well, the human condition with relationships, and life experiences. Before we get into the podcast, I would just like to ask for a small favor. It would mean a lot to us if you could leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or leave a comment on our YouTube channel just to let us know how you feel about the podcast and other topics you'd be interested in hearing in. Hi everyone, welcome back to our podcast. So I'm your host Glory, and then we have our co-host Shan. And today we're joined by our very first guest on this podcast, and we have Valerie here. So Valerie, can do like a quick introduction to yourself.
Hi, so I'm Valerie. I'm very glad to be here. So I'm a law student at the University of Warwick. Yeah, and I'm just very happy to be here. I'm not sure if I should say some stuff about me, but I guess one thing about me is I really like talking to people, which I think is very relevant to our topic today. But that's just one thing to know about me, I guess.
Yeah, and I feel like we kind of needed you because we're going to talk about intro slash extraversion, and I don't think any of us, me and Gloria, are not extroverts.
Really? I thought you are though, Shan. I mean, because I remember
I don't know, I really feel
like
it's ambivert, in the middle, but more towards
Yeah.
intro, don't you think? I don't
Yeah.
know. Compared to you.
I guess
But it's like a
so,
spectrum. I
yeah.
feel like Gloria's the most
Mm.
intro, and then it's me, and then it's you on the other side.
Yeah,
thank you
Ooh,
for
it
laying
checks
that out.
I mean, I think so, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Mm.
So, based on what Yan said, we're going to talk about a lot about extroverts and then introverts, and then just how we feel about the whole spectrum, and then where we align on the spectrum, and then just some of our general thoughts about is it accurate, should we measure our types, and then how that feeds into our living, and then stereotyping people and all that stuff. So yeah, I think the easiest way to ease into this topic is kind of talking about us. I mean, we talked about it a little bit just now, but kind of talking about how we knew about where we lied on the spectrum, was it from personality tests or those type of things. Yanshan, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, so I guess the most typical personality test that people take is the Myers-Briggs, which is based on Carl Jung's theory about how people are either introverts or extroverts are the two big types. Because if you're an introvert, then the definition of being an introvert is that you get energy from inside, you get energy from your inner world of thought and feeling, and then
Being alone.
extroverts, yeah, I guess so, but also thinking and being alone and listening to yourself, and then extroverts get energy from other people and external life of going for activities and talking to other people. So I think that's I think how I define it is a lot based on where I get the energy from, but I know there's lots of definitions, and doing the Myers-Briggs test is the one which gives you the INFP or INTJ, that kind of thing, which measures you on a few different metrics, but introversion and extroversion is one of the metrics of that test.
Yeah, I think it's good that they sort of they characterize different people's parts into that sort of categories, but I mean we're gonna be mostly focusing on introversion, extroversion, and where people derive energy from. So for me, I think I'm definitely more introverted, but to be fair, actually I identify myself as an ambivert more. So but on the test it says I'm but I think it was very 51% introvert and then 49% extrovert. So I think I'm very in the middle. But if I had to pick a side, I would say introverted more, because I think I gain more energy from being by myself. As in, I think the very good way of categorizing this is when after you hang out with a big group of people, or you had a hangout with more than two people, I feel then I would feel more drained by the end of the day, and then I have to chill by myself.
Recharge.
For the next 2 days or something like that.
But I was thinking about this, is that only specific to introverts? They can, extroverts can just keep going? Because to me that also sounds impossible.
Yeah, I was about to
But
say, because I do identify as a huge extrovert, because I love, it's so embarrassing, but I love talking to people, and I love sort of going out and meeting new people. But But I do still get tired at the end of the day. But I guess maybe one thing that differentiates, like, an extrovert and introvert is the level of tiredness we feel after sort of hanging out with people, maybe.
So is it like you're physically tired because you spent energy doing it, but like mentally you feel
Yeah,
recharged?
I'm like, yeah. I think that's a
Oh.
good way to put it. Yeah, yeah.
That's
Okay.
so interesting because I
Right.
really never experienced that.
Yeah,
Well,
I
So
maybe
like mentally you
sometimes.
feel like you're
like
drained.
I'm for after I meet people, I'm like, wow, I'm so happy for like meeting people. Like it really does like give me energy. But is that the same? I'm assuming it's the opposite for you guys. Do you think?
Sometimes when I meet someone, then I'm like, oh, I build it up in my head, like, oh, I'm gonna enjoy it so much. Then when it happens, I'm like, oh, that was okay. I think I don't have to do it again. So maybe I guess that's different, but I'm not sure if that's an introvert thing, or if that's just a me thing.
Mm.
The test gave you introvert as well, right, Yanshan? Like,
But I get E sometimes and I sometimes. Like it depends. I'm also like you, like very
Okay.
much. And also, oh, actually, it depends a lot. Like for example, during COVID, I become more E because I just miss it so much. But then normally, I think I'm an I. I think regularly I'm an I just based on how I interact with people in studio. Like when I see people on a normal basis, because now we see people so rarely. It's like I enjoy most of it. But I think if it was like a normal basis, yeah, I'm definitely more I.
I was about to say like I feel the opposite actually. Like for example, I feel like during COVID, I mean, I don't think I transitioned into like a hard I, but during COVID, um because I stopped like interacting with people on like a normal basis, I started being much more comfortable with being like alone and being sort of like more closed off to myself. So it's like the literal like opposite of you, where you want to be more extroverted around like COVID time because it's so different. Whereas like for me, it's like I became a lot more comfortable, and I think even now I'm sort of like to a certain degree. I'm also maybe because it's like the summer holidays and everything, so it's not like we're not in like a like how our normal lives would be, I guess. So I'm also much more inclined towards being introvert and would also make less of an effort to sort of like constantly meet people, I think, which is very interesting to me because it's like the complete opposite, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, which is why I think, like, for example, I think I have some friends who are more introverted than me who would really be fine the whole summer not seeing anyone or talking to anybody, and they really enjoy doing their own thing every day. But yeah, like I miss other people quite a bit. But also, I guess that's why like people disagree with like the Myers-Briggs test and also with measuring intro and extroversion in general because it's definitely a spectrum, and this makes it seem very binary when it's definitely not very binary.
yeah, and I think it fluctuates like for like each person as well. And I was just about to say that like Yanshan saying that your more introverted friends, like they can just go off for the entire holiday, like not meeting any well, not really not meeting anyone, but just having very few meetups with people. And I can totally relate to that because I also have like introverted friends that can just completely have zero contact with the outside world for like an entire week, even if it wasn't COVID, like even if it was like a normal school week. Like I remember this friend, he would just stay in his room for the entire week without going out. And my mind boggles to understand how he does this because I guess on the spectrum I would be more extroverted than him. Even though based on the test, I was an I, but I was definitely more extroverted than him, which is again why I identify as being an ambivert. And I feel like it would be nice if I just sort of define the term ambivert a little bit. It's sort of like in the middle of introvert and extrovert. And the way I would best describe to see if you're an ambivert is that when you're with introverted people, you tend to speak up a lot more. But then when you're with extroverted people, you tend to become really quiet in that circle of people. And that's exactly what happened to me. Like I feel like my energy levels like fluctuate depending on how extroverted or introverted the people I'm around. And that changes how I behave around people, which is quite interesting in a way, I guess.
I was reading about this though, but is that different? Because like for example, being introverted is different from being like very reactive, and it's also different from being sensitive. So some people are reactive in the sense that like they change quite a lot depending on who they're with. So there's this theory which is that whether you're like base introvert or base extrovert is quite fixed, but then you can change. It's like a rubber band theory where you can change your how you act quite significantly depending on who you're with and depending if like the thing is important to you. Like for example, if you're like generally quiet, but like you like architecture, then like one day you have to present in front of everyone like your project, then you would just like suck up and do it just because you have to.
Oh, okay.
So that changes you a bit. But I'm not sure. Like I do believe that people have like a base level, but I also think that people can change quite a lot, like depending on who, yeah, like what you said, like,
Yeah.
depending on who you're
Yeah,
with.
I agree with that.
Yeah, because I do notice that I do get introvert. Like I mean I do become like a lot more introvert around like different situations. Like for example, if I'm in a situation where sort of everyone already knows everyone, rather than like in a situation where everyone is new, like everyone doesn't know anyone at all. So and in that case, I would appear to be so much more like introvert. And there would be a lot of situations where people are actually very surprised that like I can be like extrovert, which is like such a huge sort of like
Ooh.
difference. Yeah, but for me, it really depends on like the situation. I, if I'm like not confident, I guess, in
Yeah.
speaking up or like being the person who sort of leads the conversation, then I wouldn't do it. Yeah, so I really think it very much depends on the person, I guess.
Something else
Yeah.
that I read was also that like extroverts thrive on novelty. So do you think for you it's when it's a new group of people you're actually better compared to when
Yeah,
it's like, oh
yeah,
really? That's
yeah.
so
Dude, you
interesting.
know,
That's
like,
opposite.
yeah, really? No, it's for me. Yeah, it's because like when you said like thrive on novelty, I'm like, yeah, dude, that's my thing. Just because I just think it's so interesting to like meet new people. So, and I realized this is like one thing is that like, yeah, I think it's just because everyone is new, so I automatically want to know about them. So that sort of drives me to talk to them. Yeah.
But but when you already know everyone, then you have more common ground to talk about.
That's quite true also. So I guess I'm like, so then I talk
Like
to
it
them even more,
depends.
I guess. Yeah.
Mm, I think when I face in new situations, I'm generally more quiet, I think, when it's new people. Because I just like don't know how people are like, what they want to talk about, and I prefer if they talk about themselves, like letting other people speak to like suss them out before I like talk about myself.
Mm,
I think
yeah.
for me it depends on like how I'm feeling and like what the situation is like, because I think definitely it changes, like as in if I go to a new group of people, it also depends on if that group of people don't know each other since the beginning, or they already is an established group of people and I'm like the new person entering. I think that makes a lot of difference, because if the entire group is new and they all don't know each other, then I feel like I'll be more inclined to like make an effort to like speak up and be like getting to know other people. You know, it's kind of like in the beginning of university when you're all new and say like Bartlett in the studio, like everyone's getting to know each other, and I was like, yeah, like let's talk, let's like meet up and like get to know each other a bit better. That was me in the beginning, and then towards the end where like people have their established groups, then I kind of became like I take a step back, like I'm not as outgoing as right in the beginning. And then this time it made me realize, like in summer when I was joining like a new group of people where they already knew each other for like certain hobbies and stuff, like they all knew each other already, then I feel like I'm invading their circle a little bit, so I'm not as inclined to speak up as much, you know.
But do you feel like it's quite unnatural for you at the phase where you were making friends? Like, did you have to force yourself to do it?
A little bit, but I feel like in some way, like I feel like talking comes naturally, like once I start doing it and I overcome the hurdle of like starting to talk, then it flows and becomes like more natural for me to like keep going. Yeah. But I feel like at the same time we kind of use, like as in when we say being more introverted, it's also associated with the stereotype of being like shy, I guess, or like being really quiet, because I feel like that's how we associate like introverted people to be, which is why I think it's nice if we kind of talk about the stereotypes and like this is how we categorize people, because I think not necessarily someone who is an introvert like has to be the really shy, timid, you know, stereotype person,
Yeah.
you know.
So like shyness is like fear of social disapproval or humiliation, but then introversion is more like your preference for low stimulation, like so for more calm environments. So I think it's quite different. But I feel like especially when you're in school, people teachers would say like, oh, she's like very shy, she doesn't want to play with the other kids, instead of saying, oh, she this is a bit too much for her and she would rather be alone right now, which is usually the case. It's not that I don't like the kid doesn't want to play with other kids or is shy to introduce themselves, more like they want to like hang around. So like some studies show that kids, like introverted kids, like to hang around behind and just watch other people interact so that they can kind of suss out like what people are like and who they want to become friends with, and then they make the move, which I very much relate to, I think.
Yeah. But at the same time, isn't that also just kind of being smart and like looking at the situation first? Or is it like extroverts are just tend to be more rash? Like they just act on their impulses and like go straight ahead. I don't know, Valerie, do you feel that? Like you just go for it.
I'm trying to like, I'm not too sure too, because I guess even when I'm sort of like talking to people, I'm also sort of aware that I should also give that person space to talk about themselves. And I guess for me, it's like the reason why I want to talk to people is because I'm interested in them as well. So that's sort of like, so it's more sort of like me asking them questions as well. So yeah, I'm not too sure actually. Like yeah, yeah, that's actually a very interesting point. But I think when I'm in like new situations, I think even as I was a kid, I've always sort of, I think I've just been kind of talkative. Yeah, maybe it was annoying, I guess. Yeah. I guess it could be
But
like annoying to
it's more that like it's just so difficult to have to like get to know other people at the same time with talking about yourself, and also like self-monitoring. So like I feel like when I talk to people, I'm quite self-conscious about what they think about me and what what kind of story I'm spinning about myself, and also learning stuff about them. So it's like balancing too many things at the same time, and it makes me kind of stressed out. And I'd rather keep quiet and like learn about them first before talking about myself.
Yeah.
So I guess there's like some studies say that like extroverts tend to just be better at multitasking and holding many things in their heads at the same time, which is why they like doing these things.
Is it? That's so interesting. Cause I definitely don't really identify as like a multitasker, you know? Like,
Oh, it's
yeah, that's so
interesting.
interesting. Yeah.
So for example, if you had to do a piece of work, then you would rather like spend the whole day doing it instead of, I don't know,
Yeah.
doing a few things.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
because
why,
that's like an introvert trait, apparently.
right. That's why I guess like this goes back to the whole thing about like how it's so like it depends on like the context and depends on like who you're with, and I guess it depends on like so many factors that you can't sort of like put a hard definition to whether you're an extrovert or an introvert. Yeah, because like for example, when you mentioned about like shyness and stuff, because I do think that like I can be quite shy in like certain situations. Yeah, so it's not necessarily like like I do get like really really incredibly shy. So I guess it's different, and I do think that like even for like introverts, like you're not necessarily like shy all the time. I do think that like you have like a certain power in sort of like, you know, holding back and sort of like seeing what everyone is doing as well. I think that in itself is quite like a like cool strong thing to do, I guess.
Cool.
Yeah. It's very smart.
Yeah,
But at the same time, like I feel that like extroverts tend to be more highly regarded like in society. Or maybe just because it's like a very westernized thing to be extroverted.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. I just feel like society favors those who are like more extroverted in general, because like the sort of labels they associate with extroverts is like, oh, they radiate a lot of energy. I mean, they radiate a lot of energy and like confidence, and like they hold themselves really well when they sort of present themselves. Say if you're like in a meeting, and people who are extroverted, I guess, just tends to like speak up a lot more regarding their opinions. And I guess therefore their opinions are more likely to be considered in like said meeting, versus like if a normally shy person were to speak up. Like I just feel like people would be more tend to like pick them. And I feel like this is probably talked about in like certain interviews, like if you're more likely to like speak up and like voice your opinions in like a very confident way, like how a normally extroverted person would speak, then I feel like said company or like certain people would probably like favor you a lot more, which is I guess kind of similar in like a group project dynamic, like me and Shan talked about it in like previous episodes. Like I feel like if in the beginning you're more likely to stand up and like speak for the group, and like talk about certain things, you're kind of naturally being viewed as like a leader position or someone to like be relied upon because you're more likely to speak up and talk. Whereas even if like a certain person who might be more introverted or said say like shy and they don't want to talk about these things like openly because they find it more difficult to do so, even though they might have like really good ideas, but their opinion would naturally be not as held to the same importance as those who would like to speak up, which I feel like it's kind of a problem in a way. Like I don't know how to feel about it as well.
Do you think that's like quite specific to different cultures though? Because I feel like especially for us who've been through like Chinese or local stream where the medium of instruction was in Mandarin or Cantonese, it's like a very different school environment culture from like when we all went to international school, and then the things that teachers would say and praise is like quite different. So I guess it depends on the culture, but I definitely feel like even in school, like the comments that I would get was always like, "Oh, she's like quite good at school, but she's too quiet," that kind of thing, which is also like a bit demoralizing because I think like what you said, like then people would think that if you speak up in class, then you're smarter and that you have like better answers.
Yeah. Actually, this is really weird because in school, the comment I would get is that she's good at school, but she talks too much in
Okay,
class.
dude, that's so strange. Because
Yeah,
then
it's
you're
so
not an
strange.
introvert.
Yeah, it's. I think it's also because I knew people in class. Well, this is why I feel like I'm very much an ambivert. Like sometimes I'm like towards this side, sometimes I'm towards the other side. So like, it's really weird. And yeah, based on like the way you say like the culture really impacts is definitely true because like okay, this is kind of a stereotype. It's not like very similar, but I feel like people who came from Asian countries, like East Asian countries, like when they come to school, as in if their entire background or upbringing was like in East Asia, I feel like they're just much more quiet in like group projects or like discussions. Like they're not likely to speak up, and I think this is very hugely due to the fact that like when we're receiving education in a very local environment, like you're just expected to sit there and like listen and like take in information. Like teachers don't appreciate it if you like speak back to them and like question their authority, sort of like that. Like there's always someone that's being appointed a figure of authority and you're just supposed to follow them, which is I think why that like people in like certain cultures might be more, I guess, introverted, even though I don't know if this is like upbringing. I guess that brings us to the topic of like nature versus nurture type of thing. Like I don't know.
Yeah, like I mean I think like for that part, like the research is quite split. Apparently it's like 40 to 50% inherited and then the rest is nurture. So I think it depends because like
So
some
it's
people
half
they
half.
did these studies where like they followed children from babies until they were like adults, and then they found that babies, like even from babies like who are 4 months old, you can tell whether they're going to be introverted or extroverted based on how they react to stimuli. So like if they're very very reactive, which means that like they cry a lot and then like a lot of things irritate them, then they're more likely to be introverted because it means that they respond to stimuli very strongly. But then if they're like chill, then they're like extroverted.
Oh.
So yeah, apparently you
That's
can
so
tell from like when they're
interesting.
children.
Yeah.
So introverts are known to be more sensitive.
Yeah,
Okay.
generally.
Okay.
But would they be more emotional, or would like extroverted people be more emotional?
Yeah, right. Because to me, like extroverted people show their emotions more.
Right.
I
But
don't
but you
know.
know I'm like I don't show my like as in I'm quite like unemotional and like unaffectionate ish.
That's true
Yeah.
also. Like it doesn't affect you. Like like some people say that like for some reason when introverts argue, then they like shut down, which is what I do. Like when I argue with people, then I like shut down. I just don't
Yeah.
respond.
Yeah, that's
But
what I
it's
do too.
apparently it's
Yeah.
because like introverts care a lot more. Like because they're so affected by it that they shut down. But I don't know.
So you're saying
Right.
Valerie cares less.
I
No,
mean,
but the thing is like I'm also equally as non-confrontational as like
yeah.
Shan. Like it's a thing. Like like yeah. Yes. Yeah, which is I guess very interesting. But in terms of like nature and nurture, for like from the extroverted side of it, I'm actually really not too sure, but I always identified like as an extroverted person. Like I knew even like from kindergarten and stuff that I was much more outgoing and I love talking to people. Um, and I, but at the same time, I think it could be how I was raised because my mom, being a very typical Tiger Asian mom. So like when I was really young, she sent me to like, you know, public speaking competitions and all those sort of things to sort of hone your skill. And she comes from a good place in the sense that she wanted to sort of you know, mold my confidence, I guess, and it definitely did work. So I do think that maybe it's also because she's done all these things at such a young age, that sort of contributed to me being more comfortable to speak at the same time. But interestingly, my brother is a pretty introverted person, I would say. And my mom tried the same thing with him, like sent him to like competitions and everything. But he turned out like, you know, he still remained like introverted, and he also sort of didn't really enjoy that sort of, you know, dynamic of going out to speak, meeting new people in competitions or whatnot. So I guess it's more nurture maybe.
Yeah,
Like,
but also, do
yeah.
you think it also could be because you just wanted your mom to like you a lot, which is also kind of an introverted thing that you're like very sensitive towards what other people feel about you. So it could also be that way.
Yeah, I think so too. Like I guess like if I had, ooh, but I kind of feel like if I, even if I've not done like the, you know, the public speaking thing and all those stuff to be more like articulated in like talking, um I kind of feel like because I'm so curious about other people, I would also sort of still be extroverted, maybe to not that strong of a degree, but still be extroverted enough to sort of like be the first person to talk to people, I guess, and to still have that desire to meet new people. Yeah.
Did you get a culture shock when you moved to international school or when you moved to uni? Because it was like, do you think people responded to you differently as an extrovert?
Um, this is very like tricky because I felt like I became much more introverted, like especially
Oh,
when I went to like international school. And again, this goes back to like the whole like you know, being in an environment where it just sort of varies, like your extroversion sort of just like varies because um when I was in international school, I kind of felt like, especially in my tutor group or something, I would never speak. And even now, I'm also not the kind of person who like speaks in class, like to provide your opinions, which like goes back to what Glory said about the whole like Eastern, you know, East Asian sort of culture, because I'm also very much like you know, grown into like that idea. So if you compare that, like for example, when you come to uni, definitely I would see much more introverted compared to my other like Western counterparts when it comes to an but yeah, which is why I feel like it depends on the context. I guess if it's like a sort of like more serious academic context, I'm much more like you guys, as in I'm much more like very reserved. But when it comes to a much more friendlier social setting, I'm like pretty like the
you can
opposite.
switch, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I kind of feel like our culture is also not to stereotype or blame it on it, but like trained us to kind of be, if I don't know the answer, then I just don't say anything. Only
Yeah.
if I'm like sure of the answer or like I disagree, and then I would say something, which is not what I don't know, internationals like. That's not like a Western thing, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah. Yeah, because I feel like people just speak up irregardless of like whether they think it's correct or not. And it was also like a big culture shock to me when I went to like an international school. Like I realized kids would just talk back to the teacher, like whether like they like it or not, they just do it straight. And I was so surprised. I was like, can you do that to a teacher? And it was so surprising to me that it's almost like an equal, like the teacher and the students almost like an equal part, like they can speak on equal terms. And that was like really surprising to me because like in local school for me, like I never experienced that type of thing, which is really surprising. Yeah, so I guess for Valerie, I think she kind of, I feel like she agrees that it's sort of like a genetics type of thing, like it's sort of ingrained in you in the beginning. And
Yeah.
I feel like that as well, but then I feel like with extroverts it's much so that if you're extrovert you kind of just continue, as in I feel like because society favors them more in that way, so they kind of continue doing that. But then I feel like for introverts it's sort of like you start off being very introverted, and then I feel like a lot of this is like relevant to a lot of introverts. You kind of have to like work your way into being more outspoken just to be able to participate in like group settings and like dynamics in a sense. And then I just feel like I guess the interesting thing that I wanted to talk about is that I feel like this is also related to upbringing in a way, because I had a friend, like he was, I think he identifies as being introverted, but I see him being very well in like group settings, say like events and like school events and like parties. Like he's just very good at like talking to other people. And then when I ask him like, oh, why are you so good at like talking to other people when you like claim that you're an introvert? And then his reasoning would be that because like for his family, like because his parents have a lot of family friends, so like since he was a young age, like his parents would invite a lot of people over to his place, or they would go to like a lot of other people's houses, and then he would be forced to like interact with those people in those type of settings, which made him very good at talking to people and like making small talk when he's at these events. And then I found that to be very interesting because I've never had that. Like I feel like my parents are also very like quite introverted in the way that we don't have a lot of family friends gatherings and those type of things. So I'm not exposed to that type of thing. So in parties I'm very much not that like forward to like talking to people I don't know at all, you know.
Yeah, I feel like when I was younger as well, because I feel like school is quite an extroverted, like it's good for extroverted kids if in school, because the whole popularity like construct thing is a lot based on how whether
Oh
you get along with
yeah.
other people. So then yeah, I feel like I had to be taught quite a lot, like how to cope with just putting myself out there. I even had to be taught like how to make friends. So my mom would like give me like small pieces of food and stuff to share, because if not I just wouldn't talk to anyone the whole day. So then I was forced to make friends. I remember once like I was so scared that I would like vomit. Like I would like be so scared to talk to someone that I would like rather puke than talk to them. So that was quite horrible. So I feel like school is quite bad for that. But then because of that, and because like my mom kind of forces me to talk to other people, so then that's kind of, and also I think because like in school you're trained that like the right kid to be is the kid who talks a lot. So then that kind of forced me to be more that way as well, because I want to be like
Liked.
successful and
Yeah.
well liked. Yeah.
Actually, I feel like you bring up a really good point that is really nice to just discuss, like the whole popularity thing. Because the thing is, I feel like school is a very, I guess, special environment. Like it's completely different to say the outside world, or like I don't know, the real world where you start working and interact with like society and other people. Because I feel like school is a very contained environment. Like this is the amount of people you have in your year or like your class that you interact with. So it's a very contained amount of people. So you kind of you know people, you kind of know a little bit about everyone, and everyone knows a little bit about everyone else, and including you. And the thing is, this is I feel like this is also probably where the whole extroverted people gets a lot more like it, like there's more favors in their way, because being extroverted in like a school setting generally means that you're gonna be more well known and well liked and like quote unquote popular, because you always put yourself out there. More people know you, you have more opportunities to like showcase yourself and like do things so people know you, and that results in like popularity. And I feel like that's sort of probably where the whole thing stemmed. I feel like, I don't know if you guys feel
Yeah.
the same way.
It's like a cycle, right? Like because the more well liked you are, then like the more people know you, then the more you take up leadership positions, like the more you become president and like head prefect, that kind of thing, then the more people like you again. So it's like more and more
Yeah,
like good for you to be extroverted.
yeah.
Yeah,
Do you
I
feel
guess
that way?
like
Yeah.
I guess like, it takes like a certain type of people to sort of recognize the power of like being an introvert, as in like the strengths that like an introvert still has, in terms of like, for example, you don't have to be like sociable, or you don't have to be like the person who speaks a lot in class in order to like to thrive, I think. Because like I feel like for Yan Shan, because the teachers knew that like you were smart, like as in international school anyway, as in even though you like you don't speak out as much as like the next person, I guess. So but at the same time I do think that it's sort of like, I guess it takes like a certain type of people to sort of recognize that being the sort of like surface level of um being extroverted, or being able to talk more, or getting along with people, or just knowing a lot of people in general, that doesn't necessarily equate to how great you are in like the more important things in life, I guess. So I guess like maybe I guess the thing about the sad truth about like primary school, or like that sort of like more earlier levels of like education, where everything is much more black and white, people do tend to sort of equate that to like popularity and all those things. But yeah, but I do agree that like that sort of happens. But I guess it also depends on how extroverted you are. Like for example, if you're sort of like a low extroverted, that might not be the case. Like you might not be like the most popular person in school, or like, you know, you might not have like, you might still be satisfied with just like a very limited number of friends, just that your level of extrovertness is like, you know, you just talk more to that same group of people, I guess. Yeah, if that kind of
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, I
Yeah, I
think
think so.
I was gonna say that because Valerie's saying that it takes a certain amount to like get to know that person if they're not like that outspoken, and I feel it also just takes time to get to know the person as well, just as like a general rule, which is why I think it's like way different after you graduate and you start working, because you're not no longer in a contained environment, and like there's no sort of like all these reputation type of thing where this is what you're known for and things. So I think generally speaking, like I feel like people are just more inclined to like listen to you regardless of like how you are, because I feel like this is also based on a book, I guess. It's called like Quiet by Susan Cain. I actually
Dude, I was reading that. I
reading
read
right
it.
now.
Yeah,
I
I
read
finished
part
it.
of it. I read part of it. I haven't finished it. But I think the main thing I got from the book is like it's true that society favors like extroverts more, and introverts have to like sort of train to like be more outspoken. But I think in the end, I think it boils down to just for every person just to like be there and like listen to whatever someone says, because it really shouldn't matter based on like your quote unquote personality type or what. It should be based on like what you're saying and the quality of the content that you're offering to whatever setting you're in, you know.
Yeah, even though like being a good listener is an introvert trait, I feel like some extroverts I know are really good at it as well, and that's why they're so good at talking to people and like becoming well liked. It's because like they actually listen to what you're saying and they like respond to it as well.
Mm.
But I guess going back to the fact that, like, I feel like sometimes being introverted is all right, and especially in Asian cultures, it's quite like, accepted when you're smart or good at school academically. But I think it's quite different for people who are introverted without necessarily being much better than everyone else at school, who's like an average student. So then it's like quite a bad situation for them compared to, because at least if you're like very passionate about something, or if you're very good at like chess or something, then you have an excuse to be quiet, which is
Yeah.
kind of unhealthy as well.
Yeah. I think it's kind of toxic in a way. It's sort of like you have to find something else to balance it. Like, oh, but because you're good at this, therefore it's okay if you're quiet. Whereas I feel like if you're more outspoken, then it's like, oh, it's okay because she's like very good with her words and like she can present well anyways. So yeah, I do think it's quite toxic. But in a way, I think it's just nice for any person to like find something they're passionate about. Like it doesn't have to be linked to whether you're very outspoken or not. You know, I feel like that doesn't have to be something that defines you in a way.
Yeah, so you don't think that it affects the kind of job that you choose in the future?
Yeah, I to be fair, I don't I maybe this is just like speaking from personal experience. I don't feel like being an introvert would like oh, well to be fair, I identify it as an ambivert, but I don't feel like it as in I don't feel particularly disadvantaged compared to if I know that a lot of extroverted people would be competing for the same position as me. You know, because I feel like I have something to offer, and it's really based on like the quality of like what I say and like the things I think about rather than like how I well I think how I deliver it is like another thing, but like it shouldn't like the how much I speak up and like how I function or gain energy shouldn't really affect the quality of how I do work. You know, it does in some way, but not to a very large degree.
Yeah, I agree. Which is why, like, just now, I mentioned like it takes like a certain sort of type of people, which I assuming, and I also hope that like the people now, like you know, recruiters now, they are progressive enough to understand that like you know, it takes these sort of. It's really fine for you to sort of like be like being quiet shouldn't be seen as like a weakness, I guess, because ultimately they would know that it boils down to like your abilities and things like that. So I personally would also think that like it's not something, but I at the same time I can't really speak for like introverts, I guess, but I do think that like if the person understands that how good you are and whether you are worthy enough to be hired is not based on like how extroverted or introverted you are, then that person is worthy of hiring you, if that kind of makes sense. Like if that person doesn't think that like if that person sees sort of like being quiet as a weakness, then it probably shouldn't. It's probably not right for you anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess even at our level, like when you're at school, it's like, oh, you want to be friends with someone because they're very popular. But now, it, yeah, I don't really think I look at whether they're extroverted or introverted when I make friends with someone. It's more about who they
Yeah.
are and whether I
Yeah.
like talking to them.
Yeah, which is why sometimes I feel like some companies like they make people do these type of personality tests, and I feel like it's a little bit tacky. Like I understand why they do it, but at the same time, I like as in I don't know how much they value the type. Like I feel like it might be nice to use it as a reference. It's sort of like how I feel about the Myers-Briggs test. Like it shouldn't be like how you view this person as a whole. Like it should always be taken with a grain of salt because it's like never accurate since the person fluctuates so much. So I feel like
Yeah.
for companies to use like personality tests to like categorize and define people is like very hard because people fall into gray areas so much. It's the same thing as categorizing myself as like an ambivert where I feel like I fluctuate so much. So it's hard to just pinpoint someone as a certain character or like this is their personality. It's very difficult to do that. So yeah, I find it a bit weird that companies do that, but I understand where they're coming from. But I just hope that companies that do this don't use it as like a very like stern, like strict metric to like measure people, and it should be like
Yeah.
viewed upon other things. Yeah.
It is quite dangerous as well because like it creates like biases like within them on like certain types of people, and it's possible that they also tend to favor like a certain type of personality, which I guess to a certain degree is maybe that's why they want to do those tests too, like if they're looking for a certain type of personality. But I do agree that like it shouldn't, a person's abilities shouldn't be reduced to being measured by how much they talk to people, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess even when you I guess if companies use it to look for different types of people, then it's all right. But if it's like one kind of person, then that's kind of scary. Like for example, like a lot of bankers have the same kind of personality, which is kind of scary.
Yeah,
And
it's
it's
so
kind of like what
freaky.
caused, yeah, kind of like what caused
Really?
like 2000. Yeah,
Yeah,
apparently
they like them to be like very
risk taking and
speak their
Oh.
mind,
like
I guess.
schmoozing. Okay, that's quite bad.
What
This
is
is bad.
smoozing?
They're offending
What
lots of IB students.
Like they like to talk to superiors and hang out with them.
They have a certain type of intensity, like a fearlessness, I guess, when they
Yeah.
go out and speak to people.
Like for example, in the 2008 financial crash, like the kind of personality you need would be the kind to keep going for subprime like loan mortgages, which is like the kind of person who's like, oh, it's like it's working now, so why don't I just keep doing it, and I might get paid off, but I also might not, but it doesn't matter anyway. Like I'll just try,
Oh.
which is like a risk taking personality.
Okay, I didn't know that. Maybe because I haven't met a lot of bankers in my life, so I don't know. But yeah,
Yeah,
it-
and like in
Uh-huh.
terms of like extroversion, I guess, like if you were to put like the bankers like on a scale, I'm very, very far from that. Like they're very like much way up high in the extroversion scale than like I am. So I guess it's like the different degrees.
I guess maybe for like businessy type of thing, like people just tend to favor those, because I guess a lot of businesses like they associate business with like risk taking, and they're like, we need that type of people to be on board. So I guess that's probably why. But I feel like if you have a environment with like all of these types of people, isn't it kind of boring in a way? Like I feel like you need some type of other people to balance it out.
Yeah. That's why I think that it's so relevant for like society, I guess, to view introversion as like the weaker part of like extroversion, because I think that like they complement each other. Like you really need like each other to sort of feed back into your purpose, I guess. Like an extrovert would require an introvert, if you think about it. Like say if I'm in a new environment, I would need a person who's like scared to talk to. So I'm able to fulfill my purpose as like an extrovert to actually talk to that person, if that sort of makes sense. Which goes back to like what you said, like if everyone's just talking, there's just no like everyone would just be like the same, and there wouldn't be like so much like variety, I guess, in like our everyday lives.
Okay, so this is like a random question, but would you rather date an introvert or an extrovert?
This is so interesting, but I really think it's just like my personal opinion. But I would want to. Okay, this is so extreme, but I would want to date a person who's much extroverted than I am.
Oh,
but
jeez.
but it's
Wait,
because
who's much more what?
who's much more extraverted. You would think that I would prefer
Oh.
like an introvert to compliment, but I guess it's because I guess this goes back to like how sometimes I prefer like to be introverted in like certain situations. So I guess like when it comes to like say romantic relationships, I would very much prefer for me to be the one who speaks less and be that to let that person guide the conversation more, or like to guide, to be the person who takes the lead and therefore be more extroverted, I guess. Yeah.
I think it's actually a good point of I read this somewhere, but like when you're in a relationship, like sometimes you want to be the opposite of like who you are on a normal daily basis, like just to like balance it out. I think I read it somewhere. It's probably the School of Life because I like them, but I think it's just, yeah, I think it's nice and interesting to hear that you want to balance in a way. But yeah, like going back to the point of like the two sides balancing out, I feel like it's also relevant in like group dynamics as well. It's sort of like the whole thing of like having a leader. Like you have a leader for a purpose. You can't have 10 people that are all leaders, otherwise the project probably wouldn't work because everyone's like clashing ideas. Like you need someone to be able to be there to like follow the rules and like the schedule and the organization for the project to run smoothly. So yeah, I think it also goes the same with like introverts and extroverts too. So yeah, the whole dating dynamic thing is also quite interesting to hear.
Yeah. Wait,
What
so
about
what
you,
about
Yan-Shan?
you guys? Yeah, what about introverts?
I don't know. I think I would want to date someone who is, yeah, I think to be fair, like more extroverted than me. But that's like kind of the opposite of me. But just because I think it's because I like hanging out with people, but I don't want to be the one to constantly have to be organizing it. Sometimes I just want to like tag along if someone else does all the work, and I just like am there and I can enjoy like the situation, I think.
I feel like for me, like I would say extrovert. I feel like all three of us picked extrovert. I would say extrovert, but I don't feel like it would be so strict that I'm like I have to date an extrovert, you know? Like I would be probably okay with dating an introvert. I think it all boils down to the person as well. And I think it's more so how do I phrase it? It's kind of like I think the most important thing to me is like when you're in a social situation, like being able to sense like different people's like vibes and opinions, and like that determines like how they function in a group setting, and also being able to like sense like how I'm feeling as well. I think that's really important to me, like being sensitive enough to like feel other people's emotions and like how I'm feeling in a group setting. I think that's really important to me. So yeah, I think it doesn't really matter. I think it's more so just like how the person functions and like how they behave in like a group setting, which I think it's different, like cause I feel like each extrovert and each introvert behave differently anyways in a group setting, so it's very hard to like pinpoint for me.
Yeah, I do think that maybe one of the reasons why we would sort of tend to prefer like extroverts is because again with the whole like I guess it requires less effort to be like the the more introverted one. And I guess the reason why it requires less effort is maybe because if you're the extroverted one, because you speak your mind, you're the person who plans stuff and you sort of lead things, it also means that you're taking more risks just because you're doing more things. So therefore I guess we just want to sort of not avoid, but I guess we would rather prefer the person who takes like less risk, because it's much more taxing to be the risk taker, I guess, in in a relationship or in like any relationships for that matter.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
And it's also nice to know that I just like them to show that they want to talk to me and that they like me.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
just
yeah.
easier than me thinking of things to say.
Yeah, maybe it's just like a relationships thing and like not a introvert extrovert thing maybe.
Yeah, it could be. Oh, that's true.
Yeah, I think it's kind of I think it's kind of like I think this is definitely stepping into like the stereotypes like we feel regarding like extroverts and like introverts. I think maybe for like all of us we probably like want someone that like is willing to like take charge and stuff. That's probably like the stereotype that links with like being an extrovert, which is why at the same time like I was struggling to like say aside, because I feel like it's so different. Like I feel like so many of the qualities doesn't just it's not just based on whether you're extroverted or introverted or not. So I think it was like kind of unfair to just say like which one do you prefer, like based on just like this one trait, which is like probably like 0 point something % of like the entire person, you know. So yeah.
Yeah, that's so true. I completely agree, actually. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
also I do think it determines a lot about people. This base like being an introvert, extrovert. Hmm.
I guess
Like what
maybe
it
it's
like
because
yeah,
it, yeah.
subconsciously.
Yeah, I guess maybe it's because it ties so closely into like social relationships, as in it's so like it's such a relevant factor in terms of like social relationships. So maybe therefore, because social relationships in itself are seen by most people as important, so therefore we put more value into like introvert and extrovert.
Yeah, I think
Hmm.
that's why
Yeah.
I think we're also feeding into the cycle of like how society like favors
Mm.
extroverts more, which is
Which is
I don't
not
know if this
great.
which is not great. Yeah, I think that's why I was trying to like jump out of the whole mentality of like this is good because I felt like it was unfair to like base this one trait off of the entire person. So yeah, maybe I take it back. I feel like I can't say because there's so many other factors like involved, you know?
Yeah, but I guess sometimes I prefer a particular like because extrovert comes with like a constellation of like surrounding traits, and I think I like those traits. But yeah, that's true. I'm not sure. As in like that's very cubbyhole for that person. So sorry, but yeah.
If like your future person like listens to this, they're gonna be like so much expectations placed on me. But yeah, is it the same for you guys with friends, or you like you don't really care? Oh yeah, and Shan said she didn't really care for friends.
You mean like how introverted or
Yeah,
extroverted they
yeah,
are? Yeah, for me it's kind of just like if they
Vibes.
make me happy, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, if they make
yeah.
me happy, I
Fair
guess.
enough. Fair
Yeah.
enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Do you guys have anything else to add, or
Um
Oh, I guess it's like, do you have any? I think for me, like looking back, would I? I feel like I've changed quite a lot from becoming more extroverted over time. But I think it's like at because when I was younger, I used to think that being extroverted was like such a good thing. Like it can only be a good thing to have more friends and be more popular and be always busy. But now I think a bit differently. So it's more like yeah, it's like you have to find the balance between both. And I'm way more. Oh, that sounds so lame. But yeah, it's like it's true. It is nice to have a balance between both types of activities.
actually like because I think we talked about a lot of the problems that like introverts face is kind of like oh society doesn't favor introverts is more and then we have to like make more of an effort to speak up and then we feel so drained by like the end of an event. That's like a lot of the problems that introverts face, but we haven't talked about a lot of the problems that like extroverts face. So like Valerie, do you have any like insight you can share with us that like I think problems that extroverts face because they're favored so much that I feel like it's just nice to have like a sort of balance between both and then we talk about like the weaknesses of like both sides a lot more.
mm. Well, the thing is, again, because I fluctuate like in like different situations, so I can't say that like, I speak for like the rest of the extrovert the
Yeah.
population, but like I'm not too sure. But I guess even before this conversation, I never sort of knew that. I mean, yeah, I guess I was never sort of so highly aware that introverted people are sort of like extroverted people are like favored as much, just because at least for me, it comes pretty like naturally, like as in I don't see it as sort of like me having like the upper hand over like people who speak less, but I think it's just me being sort of like oblivious towards like you know the challenges that other people might face, I guess. But um yeah, but I wouldn't say in terms of like the if we measure it according to like the societal standard of like you know being able to speak your mind is like much better than not. I definitely do agree that like introverted people you know have way more challenges. So I wouldn't say that like there are any like major difficulties that that I think extroverts could have, just because it's based on like the societal standard of introverts. You know, it automatically like sort of
Yeah.
gives a disadvantage, I guess, to introverts. Yeah.
I guess another way to frame it would be like the advantages that introverts have, and there's quite a lot. It's like you can think deeply about problems, and then you like very persistent at solving a particular problem. So like if something is bugging you, you just like keep going at it. Whereas according to research, extroverts will give up much more easily and much sooner than introverted people. So I think it's like things which introverts are good at, which extroverts miss out on as
Mm.
well.
Ooh, like I guess one thing, maybe it's like for example, like I mentioned just now, it's like because you're sort of like you're putting much more out there, so therefore it also creates like much more risks, I guess. So by risks, it could be like a lot of things. Like for example, it could be like more people not liking you. That could be like a reason why. So I guess it's also not very ideal to have like more people to not like you, I guess. But I guess
Yeah.
yeah, like people tend to be more sort of because you're so under like the spotlight, I guess. So you would be
And I
more
guess you can
prone
also
to.
become like consumed by what other people think about you
That's
because
true.
you're just with them
That's
so
true.
so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. Okay. That's really interesting. I've never really thought about that. I mean, I don't really experience that type of thing. But yeah, it's really interesting to hear it like from both your perspectives and I guess also research too. So I guess to conclude this episode in a way is that I feel like you can measure like introversion and extroversion to a certain extent, but I feel like it shouldn't be like an absolute measure of like how you are as a person because as we said, like people fluctuate and then the settings determine like how you react and behave in a certain setting. So it's always different. And like so yeah, people can change over time and like fall into certain gray areas like ambiverts or like just how like as you grow up you can also change along the way. And then yeah, so we have all these stereotypes that people associate with like different types, and we obviously talked about how like society favors one over the other, so it might be a bit more difficult for introverts. But at the same time I think it's also really important for people to just like be there to like listen a lot more to what like all different people are saying. Yeah, and then I think ultimately just like understand how you function as a person and then like work towards area that you feel like you have to improve or like work on, and it's not necessarily the end of the world, and I feel like it's just nice to listen to other people's experiences and then like learn from that and then like enhance yourself as a person. So yeah, it was really an interesting chat. Do you guys have anything else to add for to conclude?
Well, I guess like for example, I think this whole sort of I guess stigma of being more introverted or being more reserved implies that you're not as charismatic or you don't have as much to offer to like people or things like that. I think it's just that sort of like stigma that I think a lot of people are not aware about, that this sort of like stigma exists. And I guess like maybe because I think it's so like it happens so like frequently in our lives, but it's just that it's something that we never talk about. Like for example, if we never had this conversation, I would never sort of be so much more aware of like all these things. So yeah, so I guess maybe more people just need to know about this sort of like underlying stigma that people have.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Because I do think about it quite a bit, I guess, because like coming from introvert's point of view, it's like quite scary.
Yeah.
But I think what I would say also is that like yeah, like who the type that you are doesn't really define who you are, and you can definitely like train yourself to be better at parts that you're not good at. So like for me, if I don't like public speaking that much, so like before I have to present my project, I like really write a whole script and like borderline memorize it because I have to. And I think that's like a coping, like there's definitely ways to find coping mechanisms to like deal with these kind of things.
Yeah.
And it's nice to like challenge yourself to like do things which are scary.
Yeah, and I feel like stepping out of your comfort zone in general is just nice because you learn new things anyways. So yeah, it's really cool. And it's just nice to like hear it from different perspectives for me. So yeah. Okay. So thank you so much for joining us today, Valerie. It's really nice to chat with you and like learn like different perspectives from your side as well. So yeah.
Yeah, I really
hope you enjoyed
it.
talking
Thanks
to
for
us.
having me. Yeah, yes I did, because I reinforces my passion.
Okay, that's really
Yeah.
nice. Okay, so we hope our listeners are going to enjoy this episode too, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you for joining us. Bye.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.